Something strange is happening to thousands of profitable businesses. Their customers have not disappeared. Their industries are not collapsing. Many of them still make money, but their owners are running out of something they cannot buy more of: time. Across America, people who spent 20, 30, sometimes 40 years building local companies are reaching the same moment. They want out. Not because the business failed, because they are getting older. The plumbing company still has customers. The manufacturing shop still has orders. The commercial cleaning company still has contracts. The HVAC business still has trucks leaving every morning. But the person who built the company no longer wants to answer emergency calls at 11 p.m. They want to travel. They want to spend time with their family. They want to retire. And suddenly, an asset that took decades to create needs a new owner. This is where one of the least discussed business opportunities of the coming years begins. The Exit Planning Institute reports that baby boomers still control a huge share of privately held American businesses, while roughly 3/4 of surveyed owners said they expected to transition within 10 years. Think about what that actually means. This is not one company for sale. It is not one industry. It is an entire generation approaching the exit door. And behind that door are companies with employees, equipment, customers, supplier relationships, locations, licenses, processes, reputations, and years of operating history. Some will transfer to children. Some will be acquired by competitors. Some will be bought by private equity. Some will be purchased by individual entrepreneurs. And some will simply disappear. That last category is the one most people underestimate. We tend to assume that if a profitable company exists, someone will obviously buy it. But businesses are not houses. There is no guarantee that every good company finds a buyer. Project Equity has described this demographic shift as the silver tsunami, warning that many aging owners do not have clear succession plans, and that some viable companies may ultimately close instead of transferring to a new owner. Imagine the absurdity of that. A person spends 30 years building a business. They survive recessions. They survive competitors. They survive bad employees. They survive customers who never pay on time. They learn which supplier can be trusted. They discover what prices work. They build a name in the community. They create a customer list that would take a new company years to reproduce. Then they reach 68 years old. Their children have careers somewhere else. Employees do not have enough capital to buy the company. A strategic buyer never appears, and the owner starts thinking about closing the doors. The business did not fail. The succession failed. That is a completely different problem, and every problem creates two sides. For the owner, it may be painful. For the right buyer, it may be an opportunity. Because consider the alternative. A 28-year-old entrepreneur decides to start an HVAC company from zero. They need a name, a website, vehicles, technicians, insurance, customers, reviews, a phone system, pricing, suppliers, advertising, scheduling, management, and most importantly, they need time. Time to discover which decisions are wrong, time to earn trust, time to build recurring relationships, time to become known. Now place an established company beside it. 20 years old, 30 employees, thousands of customer records, experienced technicians, operating systems, vehicles, a recognizable local name, actual financial statements showing how customers behaved in the past. The first entrepreneur is buying possibility. The second buyer may be buying evidence. That distinction changes everything. Starting from zero means asking, will this work? Buying something established allows you to ask, why has this worked and can I make it work better? Those are radically different questions, and this opportunity hides in plain sight because culturally we have romanticized creation far more than acquisition. Tell someone you are building a startup and they imagine ambition. Tell them you are trying to buy a 30-year-old commercial landscaping company and they may wonder why. But the bank account does not care which story sounds more exciting. A company doing something ordinary can create extraordinary wealth if the economics are strong. And this coming wave of ownership transitions creates an unusual situation. There may be more sellers motivated by age, lifestyle, and succession than by business weakness. That does not mean every seller will offer a bargain. It does not mean every old business deserves to survive. And it definitely does not mean buying a company is easy, but it changes what is available. Imagine walking into a market where some sellers have one priority above maximizing every possible dollar. They want certainty. They want their employees protected. They want the company name to survive. They want someone they trust to continue what they built. They want to stop worrying about Monday morning. That seller behaves differently from a venture capitalist trying to maximize the price of a fast-growing technology company. For an aging founder, the transaction can be financial, but it can also be emotional. They are not selling inventory. They are selling 30 years of their identity. The employees may have attended their children's weddings. The first customer may still be a client. Their name may still be on the building. And that creates a market most people do not understand. Because sometimes the highest offer is not automatically the winning offer. Trust matters. Continuity matters. Timing matters. Structure matters. And the buyer who understands those things may see opportunities invisible to someone looking only at spreadsheets. But there is an uncomfortable question hiding beneath this entire wave. If these businesses are truly valuable, why would so many owners struggle to transfer them at all? Why would a profitable company ever reach the point where closing the doors becomes a realistic possibility? Because when you look inside thousands of owner-operated businesses, you discover a problem that can destroy decades of value almost overnight. The business works, but only because the owner is still standing in the middle of it. Imagine buying a company that supposedly produces $700,000 a year in profit. The numbers look strong, customers are loyal, employees have been there for years. The seller assures you everything runs smoothly. Then the owner leaves. Within 3 months, revenue begins falling. The biggest customer wants to know where Bob is. 2 senior employees quit. A supplier suddenly changes payment terms. Nobody knows how certain jobs are priced. Important customer information exists in the former owner's phone. And one of the most profitable contracts turns out to depend on a handshake relationship created 15 years ago. You thought you bought a business. What you actually bought was Bob, and Bob just retired. This is one of the biggest problems hiding inside the coming business transition. Many small companies were never designed to be sold. They were designed to be operated. The founder started doing the work, then hired someone, then hired another person. Customers increased. Revenue increased, the company grew, but the owner remained the central nervous system. Every important decision passed through them. Every unusual problem landed on their desk. Every major customer knew their mobile number. Nothing was documented because the owner already knew everything. For 20 years, this may work perfectly, until someone tries to remove the owner. Then the company discovers how much of its value existed inside one person's head. This creates one of the strangest situations in business. A company can be extremely profitable to own and extremely difficult to sell. The owner may take home hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. But a buyer is not purchasing the seller's past income. The buyer is purchasing future income after the seller disappears. That distinction can destroy a valuation. Suppose a roofing company makes $500,000 annually. Sounds attractive. Then you discover the owner sells 40% of all new jobs personally. Now replace them. A professional salesperson costs money. Maybe you need 2. The owner also manages crews. Now you need an operations manager. They also purchase materials. Someone must take that responsibility. That $500,000 profit begins shrinking. What looked like a machine was partly unpaid executive labor hidden inside the owner's schedule. And this is where succession becomes brutal. Owners often spend decades optimizing the business for income. Buyers care about transferability. those are not always the same thing. A business built around one brilliant owner can make that person rich. A business built around systems can make the asset valuable. That difference becomes especially important when the next generation does not want the company. The classic family business fantasy goes like this. The founder builds it. The children take over. The family name continues. Reality is more complicated. The daughter may be a doctor in another state. The son may work in technology. Neither wants to spend Saturday morning dealing with a broken delivery truck. And why should they? The founder chose that life. The children did not. So the owner suddenly realizes that the exit plan they assumed would happen automatically does not exist. Then employees become the next option. Maybe a trusted general manager has worked there for 15 years. They understand everything. Customers respect them. They would be the perfect successor. There is only one problem. They do not have $2 million. Now the owner has a valuable company, a capable successor, and no obvious bridge between them. This is why business succession is not simply about finding someone willing to work. It is about transferring ownership, knowledge, customer trust, financing, and control at the same time. Get one piece wrong and the transition can fail. That complexity creates an opportunity for prepared buyers. Because the ideal acquisition target is not necessarily the business with the best website, newest vehicles, or fastest growth. Sometimes it is a good company with a solvable succession problem. The owner is tired. The systems are outdated. Marketing is weak, but customers remain loyal. Employees know the work. Demand remains stable. The company earns money. The core engine is healthy. What it lacks is transferability. That is something a capable buyer can potentially build. This is where buying an established company becomes very different from buying a stock. When you purchase shares of a public company, you mostly accept the machine as it exists. When you acquire a small private company, you may be able to alter the machine directly. You can document pricing. You can create management layers. You can introduce software. You can move customer information into a CRM. You can build recurring contracts. You can reduce dependence on one employee. You can professionalize financial reporting. You can create sales processes. You can turn knowledge into systems. And every time the company becomes less dependent on one person, something important happens. The asset becomes easier to own. It becomes easier to grow, and potentially easier to sell again later. This is one of the hidden ways value is created in small business acquisitions. You do not necessarily need revenue to double. Sometimes, simply making the same earnings more durable makes the company better. Imagine two businesses each producing $1 million. Business A collapses if the founder disappears. Business B has a general manager, documented procedures, diversified customers, and recurring contracts. The income may be identical, but the risk is not, and investors pay for risk. The business most dependent on the owner may deserve a lower valuation because the buyer is purchasing uncertainty. The business built around systems may deserve more because the cash flow is more transferable. This creates a powerful strategy. Find a company where customers love the service but operations still resemble 2004. The owner answers every call. Invoices are created manually. Pricing has not been reviewed properly in years. Customers are stored in spreadsheets. Marketing means people know us. The website looks abandoned. Most people see an outdated company. A skilled operator may see decades of trust sitting on top of 20-year-old infrastructure. That gap is the opportunity. Walker Diebel describes the broader logic in Buy Then Build. Instead of inventing demand and building a company from zero, acquisition entrepreneurs can begin with an operating business and create growth from an existing foundation. But buying that foundation changes the challenge. With a startup, you must prove customers exist. With an acquisition, you must prove the customers will remain after ownership changes. That is why the months around a sale can be so sensitive. Imagine a founder who has personally spoken to the company's largest customer every week for 15 years. The buyer cannot simply send an email saying, "Hi, new owner here." Trust has to move. Relationships have to move. Authority has to move. Employees need to believe the new owner is not about to destroy everything. Customers need to believe service will remain stable. Suppliers need to believe bills will still be paid. A good transition is not an event. It is a transfer of confidence. And this is where some buyers make a catastrophic mistake. They acquire a company and immediately behave as if everything old is stupid. New logo, new software, new pricing, new policies, new managers, new uniforms, new suppliers. They want to prove they are improving the company. But customers did not sell the business. Employees did not sell the business. The owner did. Everyone else may have been perfectly happy yesterday. Changing too much too quickly can destroy the very thing you paid to acquire. Sometimes the smartest move after buying a company is to do almost nothing. Listen, watch, learn why customers stay, learn which employee actually knows everything, learn which process looks inefficient but exists for a reason. Learn which customer complains constantly but pays every invoice. Learn where the real profit comes from. Then improve carefully. This is not glamorous entrepreneurship. There is no dramatic launch, no viral announcement. But this is how existing value survives transfer. And once the buyer understands what should stay and what should change, the opportunity expands far beyond simply replacing an aging owner. Because a company that has survived for 30 years may already possess something a startup would spend millions trying to create. Trust. The buyer's job is to figure out how much that trust is worth, and whether it can be turned into a machine capable of surviving another 30 years. But before anyone gets too excited about buying a profitable company from a retiring owner, there is another reason this opportunity is attracting serious entrepreneurs. It solves one of the most expensive problems in business before the buyer even arrives. The market has already answered the question every startup desperately wants answered. Will anybody actually pay? Start a company tomorrow, and almost everything is a hypothesis. You think customers have a problem. You think your offer solves it. You think your price is acceptable. You think advertising will work. You think employees can deliver the service profitably. You think customers will return. Then reality begins charging you money to discover whether you were right. That is the startup game. Every answer costs something. Advertising costs money. Wrong employees cost money. Bad pricing costs money. Inventory mistakes cost money. Poor locations cost money. And the most expensive answer of all may be discovering that customers simply do not care enough about your idea. An established business gives you something different. History. Not certainty. History. You can see what customers actually paid. You can see how many stayed. You can see what happened during difficult years. You can see payroll, margins, seasonality, supplier costs, equipment failures, customer complaints. You can read reality instead of imagining it. And that is why buying an existing business can be psychologically difficult for people raised on startup mythology. It feels less creative. Someone else started it. Someone else chose the name. Someone else found the customers. But wealth does not award extra points for originality. If the objective is ownership, cash flow, and long-term value, buying evidence can sometimes be more rational than buying hope. Picture two entrepreneurs with the same $250,000. One starts from zero. The other uses their capital as part of an acquisition. The first entrepreneur spends money before the business proves anything. The second is trying to acquire a company where customers were already paying yesterday. Neither path guarantees success. The acquisition buyer can overpay. Customers can leave. Hidden problems can emerge. Debt can become dangerous. But the type of uncertainty is different. The startup asks, can an economic engine be created? The acquisition asks, Can this existing economic engine survive a new owner? That is a much narrower problem, and narrowing the problem can be extremely valuable. This is one reason entrepreneurship through acquisition has developed into a serious field rather than an obscure strategy. Stanford Graduate School of Business has studied search funds for decades. Its 2026 study continues tracking entrepreneurs who raise capital specifically to find, acquire, and operate existing businesses. Think about how unusual that is. Investors are effectively backing a person before they even know which company that person will buy. The entrepreneur's product is not an app. Their skill is finding and operating an existing business. That tells you something about how acquisition itself has become a recognized entrepreneurial strategy. But the most interesting opportunities may not look like institutional deals. They may look almost laughably small. A commercial pest control company, a fire safety inspection business, a manufacturer of specialty packaging, a managed IT provider serving local law firms, a pool maintenance route, a distributor of industrial components, a payroll company, a dental laboratory, a restoration service, a testing company, businesses built around repetitive, necessary problems. Imagine a commercial fire protection company with 600 customers. Every customer has equipment requiring inspection and maintenance. The company has technicians, schedules, records, relationships. The owner wants to retire. A startup founder entering the same industry has to create every relationship one at a time. The buyer begins with 600. That does not mean all 600 are guaranteed to stay. But there is a massive difference between protecting existing demand and creating demand from nothing. This is where the arithmetic becomes interesting. Suppose the business is decent but not exceptional. Customers stay but sales are weak. The company has no systematic cross-selling. Technicians service fire extinguishers but never ask whether the customer needs alarms inspected. The owner never built an outbound sales team because referrals were enough. The website barely generates leads. Pricing has not been reviewed carefully. The new buyer does not need a revolutionary idea. They need execution. What if average revenue per customer increases by 10%? What if customer retention improves? What if technicians become slightly more productive? What if scheduling improves enough to complete one additional appointment per technician each day? What if the company acquires a smaller competitor with 200 more customers? A small business can change dramatically without doing anything dramatic. That is the hidden power of buying something that already works. Improvement compounds across an existing base. If a startup has 10 customers, improving revenue per customer by 10% barely matters. If an established company has 5,000 customers, the same improvement can become meaningful immediately. Scale amplifies competence, and this is where aging owner businesses can become especially interesting. Some founders stopped optimizing years ago, not because they are incompetent, because they won. Their house is paid for. Their children are grown. The company generates enough money. They no longer want to spend the next 5 years learning a new CRM, building TikTok campaigns, restructuring compensation, or opening 3 more locations. Why would they? The business already accomplished its purpose for them. This can create what buyers sometimes look for: a good company that is undermanaged rather than a bad company that needs rescuing. There is a huge difference. A bad company may require miracles. A good company with neglected growth may require energy. The retiring owner may be thinking, "I am tired." The buyer may be thinking, "This has barely started." That mismatch in ambition can create a transaction. But the opportunity goes deeper than growth. There is also financing. A startup may struggle to borrow because it has no operating history. An established business can show lenders years of earnings, tax returns, assets, and cash flow. That does not guarantee financing. But evidence makes a conversation possible that a pure idea cannot always support. And if debt is used carefully, acquisition can allow an entrepreneur to control an asset larger than the cash they personally contribute. This is powerful. It is also dangerous. Suppose a business produces $600,000 before debt payments. The buyer borrows aggressively because the historical numbers look stable. Then the largest customer leaves. Revenue drops. Payroll cannot disappear overnight. Debt payments still arrive. The same leverage that increased the buyer's return begins squeezing the company. This is why acquisition is not a shortcut around risk. It changes the risk. Startups risk never finding product-market fit. Acquisitions risk paying too much for yesterday's success, and yesterday can be seductive. The seller shows 20 years of growth. Beautiful. But what happens tomorrow? Was the founder the reason customers stayed? Is technology changing the industry? Is a major customer preparing to leave? Are employees underpaid and likely to demand increases? Is expensive equipment near the end of its life? Is the building lease about to reset? Did the owner delay maintenance to make profits look better before selling? The financial statements are evidence, but evidence needs interpretation. That is why the smartest acquisition entrepreneurs do not simply search for profitable businesses. They search for understandable businesses. Can you explain why customers buy? Can you explain why they stay? Can you explain how money moves through the company? Can you identify the few variables that actually determine success? If you cannot explain the economic engine simply, complexity may be hiding risk, and this becomes especially important when a buyer plans to grow through acquisition, because once you successfully buy one company, something interesting can happen. You no longer have to ask how to start the next one. You can buy that one too. One local business can become two. Two can become five. Five can become a regional platform. And suddenly the retirement wave stops looking like a collection of small companies for sale. It begins looking like raw material for entirely new business empires. Suppose you buy a commercial landscaping company. Nothing about that sentence sounds like the beginning of an empire. 20 trucks, 40 employees, business parks, apartment complexes, office buildings, grass, trees, invoices, very ordinary. The company makes money, but it has obvious limitations. One territory, one manager, one owner. Growth has been slow. Now imagine another landscaping company 15 miles away. Its owner is 66. Same problem. They want to retire. You buy that company too. Now something changes. You do not necessarily need two accounting departments. You may not need two separate software systems. Insurance purchasing can be combined. Equipment purchasing gets larger. Marketing can be centralized. Managers can share resources. Routes may become denser. Customers with properties in both territories can use one provider. Two companies are not simply two companies anymore. They begin becoming a platform. Then a third aging owner calls. Then a fourth. This is how an industry that looked hopelessly fragmented can slowly consolidate. The individual company may be small. The opportunity is not. This is the logic behind roll-ups. Find an industry containing many independent operators. Acquire multiple businesses. Standardize what benefits from scale. Preserve what benefits from being local. Then repeat. It sounds simple. Execution is brutally difficult, but when it works, something powerful happens. The buyer can create value without inventing a new market. The demand already existed. The customers already existed. The businesses already existed. Value comes from combination. Imagine 5 separate HVAC companies. Each buys equipment independently. Each pays for its own marketing. Each recruits technicians separately. Each has unused capacity at different times. Each owner spends hours solving similar administrative problems. Combine them intelligently and the economics can change. Purchasing gets stronger, recruiting becomes centralized, advertising data improves, technicians can be allocated more efficiently. Back-office costs are spread across more revenue. One management team can potentially support a larger operation. The service did not change. Ownership did. And this is why a $2 million local business can become strategically important to someone building a $100 million company. The small seller sees their life's work. The buyer sees a puzzle piece. That does not make the buyer evil, but it means both sides are looking at the same company through completely different lenses. For the founder, the question is, what is my company worth? For the platform buyer, the question may be, what is this company worth inside our system? Those numbers can be different. A business that produces $400,000 independently might become more profitable when duplicate costs disappear. Or its customers may be extremely valuable because they fit perfectly into existing routes. Or its employees may solve a hiring shortage. Or its location may unlock a new territory. The buyer may be purchasing more than earnings. They may be purchasing strategic fit. And strategic fit can create a reason to pay. This is where the coming ownership transition gets interesting. If many aging owners in fragmented industries decide to sell over the same period, buyers with capital and operating systems can assemble businesses faster than previous generations could build them from scratch. Picture an entrepreneur in 1995 trying to create a regional pest control company. They may have opened one office, built routes, hired technicians, expanded slowly into the next city. 30 years later, another entrepreneur may be able to purchase several established routes from retiring owners and combine them. The first entrepreneur built customer density one household at a time. The second buys density. This is one of the great asymmetries of acquisition. Time can sometimes be purchased. You cannot literally buy 30 years. But you can buy some of the assets those 30 years created. Customer relationships, locations, processes, brand recognition, employee experience, vendor relationships, licenses, operational knowledge, market position. The seller spent decades accumulating them. The buyer may acquire them in one transaction. That is why purchase price alone can be misleading. Imagine a company costs $4 million. That sounds expensive. Then imagine recreating the same company organically would require 10 years. Hundreds of hiring decisions, millions in marketing, countless mistakes, and the constant risk that you never reach the same market position. Suddenly, 4 million is not being compared with zero. It is being compared with the cost of replication. Sophisticated buyers think like this. What would it cost to build what already exists? How long would it take? Which parts cannot be recreated easily? A machine can be purchased. A building can be rented. A website can be redesigned. But 15-year customer relationships cannot be ordered online. Trust has a time component. And that makes established businesses especially interesting when the new owner can add something the old owner never had. Technology, capital, professional sales, better hiring, centralized management. The founder may have been excellent at the service. The buyer may be excellent at scaling the system. Those are different skills. Take a home services company where dispatchers manually assign jobs. The buyer introduces routing software. Technicians drive fewer empty miles. More jobs fit into each day. Fuel consumption improves. Customers receive better arrival estimates. No customer cares about the software. They care that the technician arrives. Technology improves the boring business without turning it into a technology business. That distinction matters. People constantly ask, what businesses will AI replace? A buyer might ask, what old businesses can AI make more profitable? Those questions lead in different directions. A 50-year-old distribution company may not disappear because of software. It may become better because software predicts inventory, identifies dormant customers, automates administrative tasks, and helps salespeople work faster. The opportunity is not always disruption. Sometimes it is modernization, and aging owner businesses can contain enormous modernization gaps. The founder may still be using paperwork orders. Customers may call because online booking does not exist. Employees may manually enter information 3 times. Invoices may take weeks to send. Nobody has analyzed customer profitability. The company is profitable despite inefficiency. That word matters. Despite. If a company is already making money while operating badly, improvement becomes interesting. Contrast that with a company losing money while operating badly. Fixing it may only get you to 0. A profitable, under-optimized company gives improvement somewhere to compound. This is why some buyers search for businesses that are boring outside but messy inside. They do not want chaos everywhere. They want strong demand with weak execution, strong customers, weak systems, healthy economics, outdated operations. That combination can create room. And when multiple acquisitions enter the picture, every improvement can be reused. Build one strong call center, the next acquisition can use it. Create one recruitment system, the next company benefits. Negotiate better supplier terms. Every location participates. Develop one dashboard. Management can compare branches. The first acquisition teaches you how to operate. The second lets you reuse the lesson. By the 10th, experience itself becomes an asset. This is why a person buying their first local business and a private equity group buying its 20th company are not playing the same game. The experienced buyer has pattern recognition. They know which improvements usually matter. They know what integration breaks. They know which seller promises deserve skepticism. They know how much working capital is normal. They know which employees must be protected. They know the difference between a temporary problem and a structural one. Experience reduces surprise, and surprise is expensive. But there is a dangerous side to this empire-building story. Once buyers become excited about consolidation, they can start believing every company deserves to be bought. They begin seeing retiring owner and hearing bargain. They see recurring revenue and stop asking why customers stay. They see 30 years in business and assume the next 10 are guaranteed. That is exactly how fortunes get destroyed. Because the coming wave of businesses for sale will not be a giant clearance rack filled with hidden gems. It will contain extraordinary businesses, average businesses, dying businesses, and businesses whose biggest problem is invisible until the day after the money changes hands. The real opportunity will belong to the buyer who can tell them apart. The seller wants $2 million. The company makes $600,000 a year. You do the quick math, 3 or 4 years of earnings. It looks almost too good. Then you discover why. The biggest customer generates 40% of revenue. The owner is 70 years old and still personally closes every major sale. 3 key employees plan to retire within 2 years. The building is leased from the seller, and the rent will double after the acquisition. Half the equipment needs replacement, and the company's recurring customers can cancel tomorrow. The $2 million business was not cheap. It was expensive information. This is the part of business buying that social media tends to destroy. People love simple formulas. Buy a boring business. Use debt. Let cash flow pay the loan. Become wealthy. That sequence can happen. But between buy and wealthy sits one of the most dangerous words in finance. Reality. A business is an organism. Customers leave. Employees fight. Equipment breaks. Competitors lower prices. Insurance changes. Regulations change. Suppliers fail. And sellers know more about the company than buyers ever will before closing. That information imbalance matters. Richard S. Rubach and Royce Yudkoff emphasize a disciplined approach to evaluating existing companies in HBR Guide to Buying a Small Business. The buyer has to understand durable earnings, risks, and the real economics underneath the seller's story. Because sellers tell stories, not necessarily lies. Stories. We have the best reputation in town. Our customers never leave. We could grow easily if someone younger took over. I never bothered with marketing. The employees can run everything. Every sentence may be true. every sentence needs verification. Take, our customers never leave. Show me. How many customers did you have 3 years ago? How many are still here? What percentage of revenue comes from the top 10? How many customers renewed after a price increase? Are contracts transferable after the sale? How many relationships belong to the company rather than the owner? Now the story becomes data. Take, the employees can run everything. Great. Who creates schedules? Who prices unusual jobs? Who handles the largest customer? Who knows supplier passwords? Who recruits technicians? Who can sign checks? Who fixes the problem when the manager cannot solve it? If every answer is the owner, the employees are not running everything. They are running everything routine. The owner is running everything dangerous. Those dangerous moments may determine whether the company survives. Then there is quality of earnings. Suppose profit was unusually high last year. Why? Did prices rise? Excellent. Were those price increases permanent? Maybe. Did the company delay repairs? Different story. Did the owner reduce their salary before selling? Important. Did one unusual contract create a temporary windfall? Very important. Did revenue surge because customers rushed to purchase before a regulatory change? Completely different. Buyers do not buy historical numbers. They buy what those historical numbers imply about the future. That is why a graph going upward is not enough. You need a mechanism. Why did it go upward? Can that mechanism continue? Then look at equipment. This is where boring businesses can hide brutal costs. The seller shows $800,000 of cash flow. Wonderful. But the company owns a fleet of old vehicles. They technically still work. The seller has postponed replacement because retirement was approaching. Over the next 3 years, the buyer may need to spend $1 million replacing them. Was that $800,000 really $800,000? Economically, some of that cash was borrowed from the future. The seller saved money by postponing spending. The buyer inherits the bill. The same issue appears with roofs, machines, HVAC systems, restaurant equipment, laundry equipment, warehouses, software, anything the business requires to keep operating. Deferred maintenance is a hidden debt. It may not appear as a loan, but someone will pay it. Then comes working capital. A profitable company can still suffocate from lack of cash. Imagine customers pay invoices 60 days after service. Employees are paid every 2 weeks. Fuel is purchased today. Materials are purchased today. Insurance is due. Rent is due. The income statement shows profit. The bank account shows panic. Now grow the company 20%. Wonderful. Except growth requires more employees, more materials, and more receivables before the cash arrives. The faster the company grows, the more money becomes trapped inside operations. Growth itself can create a cash crisis. Then add acquisition debt. Now every month includes another obligation, principal, interest. The business cannot tell the bank, "Our customers are paying late this month." Debt does not care. This is why leverage can make a good business better and a fragile business fatal. Borrow conservatively and predictable cash flow can help build equity. Borrow aggressively and a 15% revenue decline can turn the acquisition into a fight for survival. And downturns happen. The buyer who models only the perfect year is not investing. They are daydreaming with spreadsheets. A serious buyer asks, what happens if revenue falls 10%? What if wages rise? What if the top salesperson leaves? What if the largest customer disappears? What if equipment replacement happens 1 year earlier than expected? Can the company still breathe? That word matters more than maximizing returns. Breathe. Businesses need room. Room for mistakes. Room for unexpected costs. Room for bad months. Room to keep good employees when competitors start hiring. The acquisition that produces the highest theoretical return under perfect conditions may be less attractive than the one that survives imperfect conditions. This is one of the biggest differences between inexperienced buyers and experienced capital. Beginners become obsessed with upside. Professionals obsess over what can kill them. And one of the most dangerous killers is customer concentration. Imagine a manufacturing company with $8 million of revenue. One customer represents $3 million. The relationship is 15 years old. The seller says they are like family. That may be comforting. It should also be terrifying. The customer can be wonderful and still get acquired. A new procurement director can arrive. Production can move overseas. A product line can disappear. Suddenly, years of friendship are irrelevant. Concentration transforms one external decision into an existential threat. The same problem appears with employees. A dental laboratory may depend on one master technician. A repair company may depend on one estimator. A manufacturer may rely on one engineer. A sales business may depend on one rainmaker. The company looks diversified because 30 people work there, but value may sit inside 3 brains. Those brains can resign. A buyer has to identify where knowledge lives. Then there is the seller themselves. One of the most important due diligence questions is simple. If this person vanished tomorrow, what breaks first? The answer reveals hidden dependency. Maybe nothing. Excellent. Maybe sales stop. Problem. Maybe pricing stops. Problem. Maybe employees panic. Problem. Maybe the bank relationship weakens. Problem. Every dependency is not necessarily a reason to walk away, but it is a reason to price risk, and price may be the most important protection a buyer has. There are almost no businesses so good that price becomes irrelevant. Pay too much, and perfection is required. Pay sensibly, and problems can be survivable. This is why an acquisition opportunity should not be judged only by whether the company is attractive. You have to judge the relationship between quality and price. A fantastic business at an absurd valuation can produce mediocre returns. An ordinary business at a rational valuation can produce excellent ones. But cheap itself is not a reason to buy. Sometimes cheap is the market trying to tell you something. The art is figuring out whether the market is wrong. Maybe the company is cheap because the owner is tired and nobody modernized the sales process. Interesting. Maybe it is cheap because 40% of customers are leaving. Not interesting. Maybe it is cheap because the industry sounds ugly. Interesting. Maybe it is cheap because technology is eliminating the industry. Dangerous. Maybe the owner simply wants certainty and a clean retirement. Interesting. Maybe earnings were manipulated. Run. This is why the next decade will not reward people who simply know that businesses are for sale. That information will become common. The advantage will belong to people capable of understanding what they are buying. Because if millions of ownership transitions really do occur, there will be a massive difference between the person collecting companies and the person collecting good companies. And once you understand that distinction, the final question becomes unavoidable. Who is actually positioned to capture this transfer of ownership? Because if one generation is preparing to leave the business world, another generation has to decide whether it wants to become their customer or their replacement. For decades, people were told the safest path to wealth looked something like this. Go to school, get a good job, increase your salary, save, invest, repeat. There is nothing wrong with that path. For millions of people, it works. But another path has been operating beside it almost unnoticed. Own the company that pays the salary. Own the building that collects the rent. Own the equipment that generates the invoice. Own the system customers depend on. And now a demographic transition may make ownership available in places many people never thought to look. Not Silicon Valley. Not a venture capital pitch event, not a crypto conference, a business park 15 minutes from your house, a company your family has driven past for 20 years, a small manufacturer with no social media presence, a service business whose owner still answers the phone personally. The opportunity is almost invisible because it looks too normal. That may be exactly why it matters. Consider the retiring owner again. They built the company in 1989. One truck, one employee, one customer. 37 years later, there are 20 trucks, 40 employees, and thousands of customers. The owner is ready to stop. For the first time in decades, ownership becomes available. Someone will decide what happens next. A competitor may buy it. A private equity platform may buy it. Employees may buy it. A family member may step in. An individual entrepreneur may acquire it. Or nobody will. That decision determines whether decades of accumulated business value survive the founder. And multiplied across thousands of companies, that becomes much bigger than a retirement story. It becomes an ownership transfer. The interesting question is, who will be prepared? Because opportunity does not automatically flow to the person who sees it. It flows to the person who can act. That means understanding financial statements, understanding debt, understanding operations, understanding people, understanding negotiation, understanding how to sit across from a 67-year-old founder and recognize that the transaction is not just about money. The owner may ask, "What happens to my employees?" A purely financial buyer hears a complication. A good buyer understands that this may be the most important question in the room. The owner may ask, "Are you going to change the company name?" Again, that sounds emotional, because it is. 30 years of identity may exist inside that name. And the buyer capable of respecting the emotional side of a sale can sometimes create trust that money alone cannot purchase. This is why small business acquisition is deeply human. Financial models matter, but the asset is filled with people, employees, customers, suppliers, the seller, the buyer. A spreadsheet can tell you what a company earned. It cannot tell you whether the foreman will leave after the founder retires. It cannot tell you whether customers trust the brand or trust one person. It cannot tell you whether a seller will accept a creative structure because they believe in you. Those answers come from relationships, and that creates an interesting advantage for smaller buyers. A giant corporation has capital. A private equity firm has professionals. But an individual entrepreneur can sometimes offer something different. Personal continuity. The ability to say, "I am not buying this to shut it down. I want to run it." For some sellers, that matters enormously, especially if nobody in the family wants to continue. The buyer is not merely purchasing a business. They may be becoming the next chapter in someone else's life work. That sounds sentimental. It can also be economically powerful, because the best transitions preserve what already works, then improve what does not. The new owner does not need to prove they are smarter than the founder. If the company survived 30 years, the founder probably understood something important. Learn it, protect it, then build. This is where patience becomes a competitive advantage. Modern entrepreneurship worships speed. Launch faster, grow faster, raise faster, sell faster, but an established company may reward the opposite. Slow understanding, careful change, long holding periods. Incremental improvement. A business that grows 7% annually for 15 years can transform quietly, add reasonable leverage, reinvestment, occasional acquisitions, margin improvement, and the result can become enormous without ever having a viral moment. That is how wealth often actually looks while it is being built. Boring, then suddenly obvious. The garage becomes a warehouse. The warehouse becomes 3 branches. The 3 branches become 12. The founder who once answered every call becomes an owner allocating capital. There is no single day where the company turns into an empire. The transformation hides inside repetition. And this ownership transition may supply the raw material for thousands of those stories. But there is one misconception worth destroying before we finish. You do not need to believe every business owner is desperate to sell. They are not. Many excellent companies will attract multiple buyers. Valuations may be high. Financing can be difficult. Good businesses are competitive assets. There will not be a magical moment where profitable companies are handed away for nothing because their owners turned 65. That fantasy is dangerous. The opportunity is subtler. More owners need exits, more companies need succession, more entrepreneurs understand acquisition, more capital understands small private businesses, and more technology makes previously old-fashioned operations easier to professionalize. Those forces are converging. The opportunity belongs to whoever can connect them intelligently. A seller needs an exit. A buyer needs an asset. Employees need continuity. Customers need service. Lenders need reasonable risk. Put those pieces together, and a transaction can preserve a company that might otherwise disappear. That is not a get-rich-quick strategy. It is almost the opposite. You are buying decades of someone else's slow work and accepting responsibility for what happens next. Which is why the right question is not, how can I get rich buying businesses? The better question is, what kind of business could I responsibly own for 10 years? That question changes your search. You stop chasing whatever is trending. You begin looking for problems you understand, industries you can learn, customers you can serve, operations you can improve, a company you would still want to own after the excitement of the transaction disappears. Because closing day is not success. Closing day is the day the seller finally gets to relax. For the buyer, it is day one. Monday still arrives. Customers still call. Payroll still runs. Vehicles still break. Employees still need leadership. Debt still has to be paid. The acquisition only gives you the right to solve those problems, and if you solve them well, something remarkable happens. The seller's 30 years do not end. They become your starting point. That may be the deepest opportunity inside this entire wave. A generation of owners spent decades creating businesses from nothing. The next generation may not need to repeat every step. It may be able to take what already works and build from there. Not by copying Silicon Valley, not by inventing something nobody has ever seen, but by recognizing value everybody has been driving past. The next major wealth-building opportunity may not arrive as a new industry. It may arrive as an old owner saying, "I think I'm finally ready to sell." And while most people continue searching for the next big thing, someone else may be sitting across the table from that owner, buying something that has already been working for 30 years.